Welcome back to Half the Battle. I'm your host, as always, Daniel Levi, and joining me today is the host of What the Heck on MMA Fighting. I'm talking about Mike Heck. Mike, welcome to Half the Battle.
Hearing you say welcome back to Half the Battle, like with me being on the line, was pretty surreal, Daniel. I listen to the show as much as I possibly can. I know things are a little crazy right now without having events on, but I do listen all the time, especially when there's events coming up because you guys break things down so well. So it's a pleasure to be on the other side with you. I think the only time we've ever been on a show together was with Nick Baldwin. Remember that show he used to do? We had like 4 or 5 people together where we'd make our fight picks. And I think it was the one fight I remember picking was Lauren Murphy versus Caitlin Chukagian. It was that card, whenever that was. But I think that was the only time you and I have ever been on a show together.
Man, that was a long time ago. Your memory is unbelievable, but I really do appreciate the kind words and obviously know that I'm a fan of yours as well. And Mike, look, I got to ask you the important question off the bat. As a lifelong Massachusetts native, how do you feel about Tom Brady going to Tampa Bay?
I wish I could say I was surprised and furious and angry about it, but I wasn't surprised. I mean, what else could the guy do in New England? If he thinks there's other challenges out there for him, all the power to him. He said the right things going out. Obviously, Gronk's going over there too. So, I mean, there just comes a time for everybody to move on and look for different challenges. And I kind of feel with Brady the same way I felt when Ray Bork left the Bruins to go to the Colorado Avalanche. I still rooted for Ray Bork. I'll still root for Tom Brady. Obviously, the Patriots will be at the forefront and, you know, whatever the hell they end up doing there with Edelman and the rest of the crew. And I think Belichick and Brady, I think this is good for both of those guys. They both have these egos. They feel like they can win without each other. And now we're going to see who does it better.
And man, it's almost like a test for true fans of the Patriots. You know, for me personally, I'm a Falcons fan, born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, been here my whole life, will only root for that team. But what's interesting is when you got, you know, franchise players like Tom Brady or in other sports, LeBron, people are just fans of the athletes themselves and not even the team. So for you as a Massachusetts native, was it like, dude, I'm sticking with the Patriots. Go do your thing, Tom. Thank you for your time with us.
I've always been a Patriots fan. Like I was with them in the 90s, like when they were 1-15. I was still a Patriots fan, still wearing my Patriots sweatsuit to elementary school every day. I always thought Drew Bledsoe was going to be the savior. And in many ways he was. Like once they drafted Drew Bledsoe and they got Bill Parcells, things really started to change. And I'll be the first one to admit, the year they won that first Super Bowl when Brady got hurt and Bledsoe started the AFC Championship game or came in the AFC Championship game, won that game against the Steelers. I was like, oh, keep Brady on the bench. I'm a Bledsoe guy. Let's keep him in there. And it turns out I was dead wrong because Tom Brady went on to have the greatest career of any NFL quarterback of all time. So I will always appreciate what Tom Brady brought to the city and brought to New England itself. But again, I understand what he's trying to do. He wants to get a different challenge and wants to win a title without Belichick and without Kraft. And you know, he's done enough for us, so I'm down for it. Go get him, man. But if we meet in the Super Bowl, I'm not rooting for you.
I mean, it is cool to see someone, you know, with so many aspirations. You want to see him go start a club up from ground zero, take him all the way to a Super Bowl. So that's cool. But again, as a Patriots fan, was it at all, you know, a dagger in the gut when Gronk went too?
I'm not surprised. I mean, I don't know what he's going to do with his WWE 24/7 title now. Is he going to be defending it while he's playing against the Green Bay Packers or against the Carolina Panthers? I don't know, but Gronk's just such a wild man. Like it doesn't surprise me at all. So, you know, good for him. Honestly, like the one thing I hope for both of those guys is that they can stay healthy. I mean, that's the one thing that I would be concerned with if I'm a Tampa Bay fan. You get 40-year-old Brady and you have a guy in Gronk who's just such a wild animal that he could get hurt on a Friday night going through Ybor City in Tampa, as opposed, let alone just being on the field playing in a football game. So cool. It's going to be cool to kind of see them together and see what they can do, especially with those other guys like Mike Evans and Goodwin. And, you know, they have a strong offense right now. So it's going to be real interesting to see how they can put it all together and kind of see Brady working under a different sort of a flow and a different kind of an offense. So it's going to be interesting. I'm fascinated by it. But again, we're in such a uncertain time right now. Like who knows what's even going to happen with the NFL season.
Yeah, well said. Were you at all like T-7 days until Belichick leaves too?
No, I didn't think he was going anywhere. I think he's licking his lips right now. He's like, I'm seeing what everybody's saying. I see what Mike and Daniel are saying. They think we may not be that great. You know, we're not going to be a Super Bowl contender. He's loving this. He's loving everybody doubting him right now.
It's going to be cool for me here in the South because we're going to get to play against Tom Brady a few times. So, I'm rooting for the Falcons all day. Now, Mike, how's quarantine life been treating you, man? Because, look, it's obviously different for everybody. On the quarantine edition of Half the Battle, I've had fighters, my favorite members of the media, just all kinds of personalities from different walks of life. So I got to know from Mike Heck, the host of What the Heck on MMA Fighting, how's quarantine life been treating you?
Honestly, it hasn't changed very much for me because I usually did all my stuff from home anyway. So before I even got out with MMA Fighting, I was just interviewing fighters all the time and hosting a couple of different shows. So the only thing that's changed is that when I wake up in the morning and I shower and get ready, I'm not taking my kid to school and then picking him up in the afternoon. He's home with me the whole time. So that's kind of one of the challenging things because if you watch any of my old interviews, he would come downstairs or come upstairs and try to creep his way into interviews. But I knew between 8:30 and 2:30 that wasn't going to happen. But now, I mean, he could walk in here at any time at this point. He's just downstairs chilling and playing Spider-Man at this point. So I hear him just flipping and jumping around. But other than that, like nothing's really changed. Like my wife's home a little bit more, so we get to spend some more time together. But not really much has changed. Like we get outside and we play. So outside of just having like that extra family time and having him home, not really has changed for me. But, the news cycle has been nuts in MMA despite all of this.
It really has. I mean, there's always something to talk about. But on a positive note, man, which fight are you looking forward to the most at UFC 249? Because there's obviously so many fights to pick from. You look at the early prelims, they got fights like Vicente Luque versus Nico Price. Early on the prelims, that speaks volumes to how stacked this card truly is. If you had to pick, your top three that you're just really looking forward to, what do you think they'd be, Mike?
I mean, obviously the main event is so ridiculous. I can't wait to see it, especially now that Gaethje has that extra time to get ready. That's just such a wild fight. I'm really excited for that. I am so fascinated with Dominic Cruz coming back. Like, I really want to see what that's going to look like. Obviously, Cejudo's just been on this tear. I know he's a favorite of Half the Battle. You guys love the cringiness of Henry Cejudo. It's great, but I just can't wait to see what Dominic Cruz looks like after 3+ years away from the sport. I mean, he didn't look great against Cody Garbrandt, but you have to think after coming off a performance like that, you're thinking about that all the time. You're thinking about that night where Cody just did whatever he wanted. He styled on him. He almost embarrassed him if you're a guy like Dominic Cruz. So that's really interesting to see how that's going to play out. I mean, there's just so many good fights in that card. It's just loaded from top to bottom. Obviously, Luque and Price is a great fight. I love Charles Rosa versus Bryce Mitchell. That's a great fight. Of course, Charles Rosa is a fellow New Englander himself. But Mitchell's just been on this great tear. And I'm interested to see Yorgan De Castro versus Greg Hardy as well. I mean, this is the New England bias playing out here, but De Castro's looking for a step up. He had that great win over Justin Taffa. Hardy's just been kind of on this weird wavelength ever since signing with the UFC. Just everything you expected could happen to a guy like Greg Hardy has happened to him already. So seeing those guys mix it up a little bit, that's going to be a lot of fun. I just selfishly want to see these fights. Like, I just want to see these guys fight. And I know there's two sides to this story, but at this point, like, I'm ready. Being in the quarantine spot for a while, like, I'm ready to go back and just watch fights and cover them again, man. I'm sure you're feeling the same way.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's going to happen. This time it doesn't seem like, well, will it happen? Won't it happen? If you know anything about Florida, you know that they kind of operate on their own. And even though it's Southeast, to me, it's like the Wild Wild West. And we're going to get to the New England connection here in a sec. We're going to get to the Calvin Katars, the Charles Rosas, even Yorgan De Castro, who's a native now. But what I wanted to talk to you about was the fight you alluded to between Cruz and Cejudo. And now it's interesting because a lot of people's narratives going into this fight is going to be how Dominic Cruz is coming off such a big layoff. And historically speaking, guys coming off big layoffs don't perform as well. And while that's true, I would not apply that to a guy like Dominic Cruz because this is a guy who's come off a massive layoff before and not just won a fight, Mike, but went on to dethrone TJ Dillashaw while he was champion. So this guy's won UFC gold off a massive layoff before. So I'm not using that as a factor to pick Cejudo. However, what's really intriguing to me is how they match up stylistically because last few fights, you've really been seeing a change in Henry Cejudo. I really feel like he's leveled up since he hit that championship status. And, you've seen glimpses here and there on the come up, but now that he is that champ plus Olympic gold medalist, you see the confidence. You see him going out there, taking more risks. And also, physically speaking, he's put on a lot of size, really filling out that frame. So, do you think it's a case where Dominic Cruz is going to be able to, sit on the outside, do his amazing footwork, which, by the way, some of the most innovative footwork in the history of the sport, and potentially pick apart Cejudo for 3 of the 5 rounds? Or is it a case where, the power, the athleticism, and also the activity of Henry Cejudo will simply trump Dominic Cruz?
And that's so interesting about this fight is we have all these questions and we don't have any answers. Like, we're not going to know. Like, 3.5 years is a long time. And I was at that fight when he beat TJ Dillashaw in Boston. I was there as a fan, and it was such a cool moment to see Cruz, after all this time, get the title back that he really never lost. And it was just an amazing moment. And what if he could do it again against the best in that division, the best we've seen in a while? And you're right about Henry Cejudo, because I think we've all known that he's had this inside of him. And I think the loss of Demetrius Johnson and, even the Joseph Benavidez fight, we were like, maybe he doesn't. I'm not really sure. And then, like, all of a sudden, it was almost just like he had this, it was almost like they put him on this weird wavelength. Like, this is how you have to fight. You're an Olympic wrestler. Like, you have to just wrestle everybody. And then he just, like, it seemed like to me that all the noise that people were saying, he just blocked it all out. And he was like, you know what? I'm just going to be me. Like, he found himself as a fighter. And you see that more and more and more. You saw it in the Dillashaw fight. Like, no one expected him to go out there and do what he did to TJ Dillashaw. Just nobody. And that's what makes this fight so interesting, because we have no idea. Like, how is he going to prepare for Dominic Cruz? Like, do you go back and just watch the Garbrandt fight? Do you go back and watch the Dillashaw fight? Like, how can you do that with a guy who has not been sitting on the couch for the last 3.5 years? He's been working and doing different things. Cruz has probably been watching a very active Henry Cejudo throughout these last things. Not very active, but at least he's been more active than Cruz has been. So he's been studying and doing his different things and trying to see how he can get better. For Cejudo trying to prepare for this fight, like, what do you go off of? That's what makes things even more interesting for me. And when Cruz came back the first time, he was still, like, in his early 30s and things like that. But now he's coming back, plus he's got Father Time to match up with as well, and that makes things even more interesting. So there's just so many questions that's what makes this fight so great. There's so many questions. We're not even going to have answers to them until May 9th, maybe even May 10th, where we can look at it even closer, and that's why this fight's so fascinating to me.
Absolutely, and you bring up the Father Time, and I'm glad you did. Not because I would count out a man of, Dominic Cruz's status. The guy's unbelievable, but more so to the fact that his style does heavily rely on speed, on reflexes. He does fight with his hands down because that footwork, it's so elusive. He knows exactly where he is in that pocket, in his range. But now, has he slowed down a bit to where he can be caught like someone like Henry Cejudo? That's what I'm so intrigued about, Mike. Now, obviously, we got to talk about this New England connection, because Calvin Kattar, look, this is a guy who, he didn't even have to be a UFC fighter. I mean, firstly, when he got signed, I believe he was, 15-2 or 16-2, something like that. But he had a full-time gig as a fight promoter. I mean, this is a very smart guy. He can do whatever he wants. He chose to be a UFC fighter, Mike. And not only did he choose to do that, he's not half-assing it. Now he's in the top 10 of one of the most stacked divisions in the entire sport. And it feels like he's really making his run right now. But as you know, Mike, if you want to be in the top 10 of the UFC featherweight division, you better go out there and beat a guy like Jeremy Stephens. And that's easier said than done. Rafael Dos Anjos wasn't able to go out there and beat Jeremy Stephens. Josh Emmett wasn't able to go out there and beat Jeremy Stephens. So, in your opinion, how big of a step up is this for Calvin Kattar? Is he ready to rise to the occasion? And also, what do you just think about this moment in general? Because as you know, all the top prospects have to fight Jeremy Stephens if they want to move up to the top 5 echelon.
I think it's perfect matchmaking. This is the fight that I actually thought was perfect after the Zabit fight. Kattar showed some signs in that, and I think the UFC kind of owed him a favor after taking that fight, because he was supposed to be the hometown guy fighting Zabit in Boston in front of all of his fans in a co-main event, and then things happened and ended up being in Russia in a main event and not a 5-round fight. And as many people would attest to, if you watch that fight, you saw the momentum switch in that 3rd round, maybe even like the end of the 2nd round, and people will say, had it been a 5-round fight, Kattar probably would have won it. But again, Zabit might have approached things differently in his own right. But still, I think Stephens' fight is a great matchup. Stephens is looking for, to continue his rise. He still thinks he has it in him. He still thinks he could be a champion or at least a contender. And Kattar, you got to feel for the guy, man. I mean, between the Boston and the Russia thing, he's been on this 249 card ever since the card was announced. Like Brooklyn, Tatachi Palace, Now May 9th, like this guy has been waiting, and I mean Stevens is kind of going through the same thing here, but to prepare for a fight and have it being taken away. Oh, wait a minute, maybe you will have it. We're just going to go on the other side of the country. Oh, it's gone again. All right, we're going to take a couple weeks off and then 5 days later he finds out he's fighting on May 9th. So this has just been an emotional roller coaster for him. And I know from talking to Kattar and his manager Tyson Chartier, he just wants to fight at this point. Like, let's just get to May 9th and fight. And Stevens is no joke, man. He's a legit contender. That fight with Yair Rodriguez was ridiculous in Boston. So Stevens still has some gas in that tank. So no one can overlook Jeremy Stevens, like you said. But a big win over Jeremy Stevens puts him up in the rankings a little bit, set up for another big fight. Featherweight's really interesting right now if you really look at it. Hasn't been a real interesting division in the last couple of years, but when you're seeing guys like Kattar and you're seeing guys like Shane Burgos come up, plus the Yairs and the Korean Zombies really close to getting title shots, things are really interesting at 145.
Yeah, well said. Even some guys towards the end of the rankings, Sodiq Yusuff, I've always been very high on him. But when you talk about mental fortitude, you talk about Calvin Kattar, because like you alluded to, Mike, he didn't have to take that fight with Zabit in Russia. He was originally supposed to fight him in Boston, and it's just such a night and day difference. Like, hey, I got a homecoming against this up-and-coming prospect. Well, now we got to go to Russia and fight him, right, where everything is stacked against you. And I'm not even just talking about the judges. I'm talking about when you fly into Russia. I know because I've had fighters fight there before, and let's just say they don't really set things up for you to win if you're not Russian. And Calvin Kattar, went out there, won that third round. A lot of people make the argument he would have won the fourth and fifth had there been championship rounds, which is interesting because it was a main event fight, Mike. And in this era of the sport, main events, even non-title fights, are 5 rounds. This one was 3. So Calvin could sit here and, put his head down and be like, man, all the odds are stacked against me, even with the fight cancellations at UFC 249. But that's not the kind of guy he is. I've been seeing this guy training his ass off like nothing bad has happened whatsoever. And I truly do expect win, lose, or draw at UFC 249. We're gonna see the best Calvin Kattar we've ever seen, Mike.
That's a great fight. I love that fight. I can't believe I didn't mention it in my top 3. It kind of like I'm kicking myself in the tail for not doing that. But Kattar Stevens is a great fight. It's just the perfect matchup to add to this formula that is May 9th, this wildness that we are here when all these other sports are canceled. The UFC is coming out with not 1, not 2, not 3 events, but 3 events in a 1 week's time span, all starting with UFC 249. They're loading the deck, and that's just a great card, a great addition to it.
So tell me about this kid, Yorgan De Castro, because, man, obviously he moved to Massachusetts. I believe he's originally from a small place in Africa. The guy is a real badass, kicks like a mule. Obviously, his Contender Series fight was actually against NFC vet Alton Meeks, who I called one of his fights in the NFC. And Alton Meeks is a guy, he ran through his opponent in the NFC. Then he goes to Contender Series, and man, Yorgan De Castro made him look like he was absolutely nothing. We're talking about a guy with a serious wrestling background. Then fast forward to a UFC debut, knocks out Justin Taffa, who, by the way, was Mark Hunt's protege. It's not like he took him down and laid on him, Mike. He knocked him out standing, beat him at his own game. Now he's got the chance to go out there and beat the very hyped, the very athletic, the very talented Greg Hardy. Obviously, there's a lot of narratives anytime someone fights Greg Hardy, but just from a stylistic perspective, you think Yorgan De Castro is up for the challenge?
He's definitely up for the challenge. He asked for this fight, he wanted it, and he got it. So I thought after the Hardy fight in Boston, I thought De Castro was like the perfect opponent for him. I like De Castro, just a very positive guy. He's just smiling, he's having a good time. And one of the things he said to me in a recent interview that really stuck out is he said that I want to be the David Ortiz of MMA. Like, that's what he wants to be. He wants to be a big poppy of the UFC.
I bet you like that.
Right? I was like, oh, this is great. But, getting a win over a guy like Greg Hardy, that's an instant bump to getting to that place. And De Castro, yeah, he doesn't have a lot of experience, but neither does Greg Hardy. De Castro's a guy you can build off of. He's got that world travelness. He's got a great story behind him. He worked security at a high school in Fall River, Massachusetts, along with being an MMA fighter. And the road to get here has been a really interesting one between grappling matches and, he's had some fights on the amateur scene with some big names. And to get to this point, to fight for the UFC, De Castro, I don't think a lot of people expected him to get to this point. So now that he's here, he's hungry. He's got the fight that he wants. That doesn't happen to a guy who's got 1 win in the UFC to call the UFC and ask for a guy like Greg Hardy, a big name in the sports world, to get it. the UFC obviously sees something in him too. So I think from a business and a matchmaking perspective, you're kind of in a win-win situation, because if Hardy wins, yeah, you could still continue to put him out there and build a name off of him in the sport of mixed martial arts. But if De Castro wins, you got another potential superstar in your hands, where the momentum, as far as how the fans view him, is going to be at an all new level. So there's a lot on the line here for both of these guys. It's an interesting fight, and I would be shocked if it gets out of the first round, Daniel.
Yeah, well said. And obviously with De Castro, I mean, we talked about what he brings to the table in terms of his power, his athleticism, but I love the guy's mindset. I mean, you hear him talk, and to me, it sounds like, okay, this is a guy that can go far. This is a guy that's focused. This is a guy that, you know, he doesn't take no for an answer, and what he's been through in the past. You know, things don't even seem like such a big deal to him. He can just weather any kind of storm. So I'm very curious to see how he develops, because he's so young in his career. He's had less than 10 pro fights, so we need to take it step by step. But obviously the UFC is comfortable putting him in there with Hardy, who we've seen Hardy since his pro debut on Contender Series. Up until now, he just lost to a top 5 guy in Alexander Volkov. So we've seen every single fight Hardy has had. Now it's De Castro's turn. But just to switch gears a little bit. So look, not all, but many media members have been criticized for being too negative around, you know, this, what's been going on. And as a result, Dana doesn't want to provide them with any information. Now, I've never once heard Mike Heck bitch or complain about anything ever. So what I want to know is, what's your motivation for continuing to produce content with a positive outlook?
That's just who I am, man. Like I'm always a silver lining guy. I'm a positive thinker. I'm not a complainer. Like the way I see it is, I like to weigh options. Like I could go in there when Dana said we're gonna fight on April 18th. You know, COVID be damned, and been like, oh, you're an idiot. Like I can't believe you're doing this and putting everybody's health at risk. But I also look at it from his sense, like he's not gonna go in there and not do his research, not do his homework. He's not just gonna say April 18th. Let's just get these guys out here and fight. There's no way that he hasn't been spending all this time, like he talked about, you know, talking to doctors, talking to attorneys, talking to everybody involved about how to put this event on as safely as possible. So I understand why people have criticized Dana, no doubt about it. I totally understand where they're coming from. But the UFC, especially being, you know, you're on ESPN now. You're trying to, you know, your goal was to become the fastest rising sport in the world, and you're there. Like you're right there. And if you go and put on an event and all of a sudden 2 or 3 guys get the coronavirus after that card, like you have so much egg on your face, it's not even funny. So if you feel like you can do this and you've done your due diligence, I'm okay with it. The fighters are getting paid. I'm okay with that too. That's the first and foremost thing. The one question I've had about this whole thing is when you say, you know, the media doesn't need to know what we're doing for health and safety. We're going to go above and beyond. It's going to be on ESPN. That's all you need to know. Like, what if me being a husband and a father, what if MMA Fighting says, Mike, you're on the East Coast. We want you to go to Florida to cover this event. From a journalistic perspective and a professional perspective, I have to look into it and be like, I can't just say no. I have to look at it. But these are questions I'm going to want to know. Like, I want to know how you're testing, how often you're testing. Am I getting tested? What if I get it? How are you going to quarantine me? Are you going to cover that? Like, these are things that I need to know, because I have a 7-year-old at home, and I can't be coming back from Florida to Massachusetts on an airplane there and an airplane back, potentially having the coronavirus. So I think it's more than fair to want to get the answers to those questions on how things are being tested from a professional perspective. Lyman Good was supposed to fight on April 18th. He had COVID. I talked to Alex Hernandez last week, who didn't get tested for it, but he probably had it and was getting ready to fight Islam Makhachev. So I understand both sides of the spectrum here. I'm not a complainer. I'm not a guy that's going to go out and be all negative on Twitter. I did get a little negative, and I almost regret doing it when some of the managers that I respect and some of the fighters I respect went on Twitter and said, well, the MMA media is the reason why this event got canceled. That is such garbage. I'm sorry. It's not true. It's not because of us. Because think about it from this perspective. I just got this job of MMA Fighting. I worked my ass off to get here. And you think like not having UFC 249 on April 18th was a good thing for me? It was a horrible thing for me. It could be a horrible thing for a lot of people in this space. So nobody celebrated UFC 249 being canceled. We just had questions that have still not been answered to this point. So that's where I come from. I understand from a selfish perspective, from a fan's perspective like you, I want to see these fights. And if they could do it and they pull it off on May 9th and the 13th and the 16th and everyone comes out of there healthy and unscathed and we have fights again, no one's going to be happier than me. But I just want answers to some of these questions that have nothing to do with fighting, because this is more important than two guys getting in a cage and punching each other in the face.
Yeah, and since the beginning of the quarantine edition, I've been saying that obviously I want fights for the selfish reasons you mentioned, but the more important thing is that they're taking the right steps, the right guidelines, and obviously I heard Dana, he submitted a 30-page proposal to the mayor of Las Vegas, so I feel like they have been taking the right steps behind the scenes, even though I don't know the exact details. I just have a feeling that, like you said, if someone gets, really sick off one of these events, it's going to be such a black eye that I'm pretty damn sure and pretty damn confident that they're taking the necessary measures. So now we just got to hope that, everything goes smoothly and everyone's healthy and safe. So that's what I'm hoping for. So, Mike, on a separate note, man, look, what's so interesting about this sport is that it consistently evolves, we could say year by year, but how about day by day, even month by month? Things change so fast. The landscape is consistently evolving. And what I want to know is, who are a few prospects you think have potential to either someday be ranked, maybe hold a belt, or just go far in this crazy sport?
Oh, that's a great question. I think at the top of my list and a lot of other people's list, Brandon Royval's right up there, because he can fight at 25, he can fight at 35. That dude, I know he's supposed to fight on the Contender Series. Who knows where things stand at that point? But I mean, between the way he fights, I mean, he's just such a wild man, trying to get finishes at all costs, like, whether it's submission or knockout. He's just such a beast. Now has the LFA record for the fastest submission in history, captured their title. So I think him being on the Contender Series is well deserved and should have happened a while ago. I think another guy, Cody Brundage, is another guy. He's the husband of Amanda Bobby Cooper. This guy's been murdering it on the regional scene in the Michigan area for Lights Out Championship. He just got another win. He's got 2 titles for them now. From what I understand, he may be heading to the Contender Series. I mean, his wrestling pedigree is outstanding. I know he's a D1 wrestler. He's just really good, and he could cause some fits for a lot of guys at 85 or at 205. So he's a guy to keep your eye on. A couple of guys from like the New England scene. Mitch Raposo is a guy to keep your eye on. He's only been a pro for, I think he's 4-0 as a pro right now, but he had an amateur career where he just annihilated everybody. Like I don't think he got any finishes as an amateur, but he just Habib'd everybody, just annihilated them, like 30-23s to like every opponent he had. But since he turned pro, he's just been wiping everybody out in the first round. He's a guy who's done it at 35. He's at 25 or 2. Definitely a guy to keep your eye on. I'd be shocked if he's not on the Contender Series this year. And another New England guy is this guy by the name of Don Shanis. He's a 145-pounder. He was actually supposed to headline the last Cage Titans event, which was supposed to be on Flow Combat. I had spoken to him before the event got canceled. This guy is so popular in New England, he sold $25,000 worth of tickets to this event before it got canceled. He had other fighters legitimately hitting him up being like, dude, like, what can we do? Like, he had to go to other fighters to be like, hey, you need help with your ticket sales? Like, I got 4 or 5 more people like who want tickets. So like he was helping other fighters get ticket sales too. Great run. He had a couple of losses, but he also broke his neck in the middle of one of those fights. But ever since he came back from the broken neck, he's got 4 wins, 4 finishes, and he can talk, man. This guy's something else. He's got an incredible story. He's perfect for the Contender Series. This guy's perfect, but he's getting up there. He's 29, almost 30 years old right now. So his clock's kind of ticking at this point, but he's a guy to keep an eye on, man. And then some of the other guys, this guy.
Wait, real quick. Sorry, yeah. I got to cut you off. You're saying this guy had a broken neck. Firstly, tell me his name one more time.
Don Shanis.
How do you come back from a broken neck?
He broke his neck in the fight. And went the full 3 rounds. He lost by decision with a broken neck in the fight. This guy is a monster. He came back like before his neck, like he got surgery to do something with his neck, and they screwed up his larynx, so it like messed up his voice for a while too. So like when he was doing pre-fight interviews and everything, like he was talking like he had this big throat. His voice is really squeaky and stuff. So like his story is crazy. He's got a really crazy stories, but that's perfect for Contender Series. So that's a guy I would look at. Raposo definitely is going to be there. Brundage I could definitely see there, and Royval looks like he's right around there as well. So those 4 I have in mind. Another guy to watch is a guy named LJ Raboli, who Mickey Gall, he trains with Mickey Gall and goes and travels with this guy. But I've been hearing about Raboli since he was an amateur for a while now. I think he's 2-0 as a pro. He's just getting better and better. And, when you're going around with Mickey and you're training at all these different places with the Matt Browns and the Dillashaws and the Cerrones, you're only going to get better at a young age. So that's another guy to keep an eye on.
What about this kid, Randy Costa? I mean, look, he got signed in the UFC at only 4-0. Actually made his debut in Atlanta, Georgia. I was there, and man, that kid put on a show. Then in his sophomore appearance, goes out there, knocks out Boston Salmon in Boston. Man, I feel like they got to take it slow because, he's only had, 6 pro fights or something like that. But the kid's very talented, hits like a truck. I'm sure you've known about him since before his UFC career. What can you tell us about this kid, Randy Costa?
Good head on his shoulders too. He's I feel like that's a common thing with all these New England guys, the De Castros, the Kattars that we all talked about, is because although they have their own respective teams, they all sort of come together as a region. And Joe Lozon is a big reason for that. There's legendary tales here in New England about Saturday sparring at Lozon MMA, where the regiment guys and these guys from all over the state and from all over the region, they all migrate to Lozon's on Saturdays, and they just beat the shit out of each other every Saturday. Like, it's crazy. That's where I started hearing about guys like Kosta and guys like Raposo and guys like De Castro. They would go in there, and De Castro would have these like monumental sparring sessions with Greg Rebello, and they would this is like a pay-per-view main event, these two guys, and just in there just beating the hell out of each other. And I feel like Lozon's really passed that knowledge on, and sort of that mentality on to everybody, because if you talk to all these guys, they all look at fighting exactly the same. Like, they're not shit talkers, they don't call each other out. Like, they're just like, we want to go in there and just be the best we can be. And Costa is like one of those guys. Like, he's got an interesting story himself. He's an exciting guy. He's obsessed with martial arts and has been for a long time. So I see, like, when you look at a guy like Costa and then you look at a guy like Mitch Raposo and you interview them, it's almost like you're interviewing the same guy. Like, it's really crazy to see how these guys develop together, and they have the same mentality because of what Joe Lozon passes on to them. So Costa's got a great mindset, a great mentality. He's an exciting fighter. And I remember I did an interview with him recently, how he said he wasn't going to fight during this coronavirus thing. He's like, luckily I'm in a position where, I've saved my money. I got enough set aside. Like, I don't have to worry. I don't have to fight right now. And people would respond to it like, oh, who's this guy? Who's this guy? And then people who know him were commenting back like, you'll know. And they would show the gif of him finishing Boston Salmon. Costa's an exciting prospect at 135 pounds. There's a lot of exciting prospects coming out of New England. And I think it's because of the lessons they've learned and the guidance they've gotten from the Rebellos and the Lozons and other guys like that.
Yeah, and another guy who we actually haven't mentioned yet is Robbie Font. I mean, yeah. Rob Font's a guy who he was, he had so much potential. He still does. And when he got signed in the UFC, they felt like he was ready to make a run right away. So they kind of rushed him up to some fights. But now I feel like we're seeing the best version of Rob Font we've ever seen. And sky truly is the limit for a guy like that. Has all the physical tools, the techniques on point. Now it's all about the seasoning and the experience. I feel like he's taking the right steps. What do you think about a guy like Rob Font?
Font's good, man. He's a guy that people have been watching in New England for a long time. He's from I grew up in Burlington. He's from Woburn, so it's like 5 minutes away from each other. So Font's always had sort of this, cult following behind him in that area. But he's a little hurt right now. He's just came off of surgery. So speaking with his manager, they're going to try, like, if all goes well here with his recovery and things are on track, they're going to try to get him back in before the end of the year. But we'll see. It was kind of rough coming off those 2 wins, and then you have to go under the knife and recover like that. But, once he comes back, sometimes it's just like a baseball player. You throw out your elbow, throw out your shoulder, you got to get the Tommy John surgery. It sucks. You're out for a year or so, but you come back and you're stronger and you're better than ever. So this could be something like that for Font. And if Kattar can continue doing what he's doing, kind of set the table for him, that's just going to increase the momentum even more for Font and the New England cartel and that whole team.
Absolutely. Yeah, we wish Rob Font nothing but the best. Didn't know about that surgery, so wish him a speedy recovery. And Mike, I'm not going to let you get out of here without speaking about your new show, What the Heck, on MMA Fighting. Obviously, congratulations for getting that on the platform it's on. Firstly, let us know when we can listen to it, where we can listen to it, any other details you want to let us know. It's all you, buddy. Let us know.
So it drops every Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern, on the website, on the YouTube channel, on the podcast, anywhere you can find your podcast. So finding a name for this show was like a nightmare because it was like a week conversation. Like, we know what we're going to do. Like, we know who's coming on, but what are we going to name it? And there are all these things that we threw out there, and going through, as you could probably attest to, there's 7 million MMA podcasts out there. Like, going through, like, oh, this sounds like a cool name, and you go and Google and be like, oh, someone's already got it. Oh, someone's already got that one. And we went through like all these different ones, and finally someone was like, let's go with What the Heck. And I'm like, I mean, I've heard that my entire life, so it makes all the sense in the world. So that's what we landed on, but really enjoying doing it. It's pretty much what I've done the entire time. Just interview fighters. We just put it all together in one show. It's just really cool. It's kind of surreal seeing my name on MMA Fighting. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's a site I've visited every day for probably a decade now. And like, it doesn't feel real, honestly. Like, and there are a lot of other people, there's a lot of other talented people out there that may have deserved the shot, but, I'm honored to be a part of that team and to have a show on that network. So that's it, man. Just keep grinding away. We just keep plugging away and keep doing these interviews and keep bringing you stories, especially in a time like this. I think everybody needs that, and I hope everyone's enjoying them and get a chance to consume some sort of MMA content while there's not fights going on, at least for the next almost 2 weeks or so.
And man, I'm genuinely happy for you that you have that, man, because, I couldn't think of a more deserving guy. And it's really cool to see, not just in your case, but some of the other outlets. I feel like the talent these days is growing exponentially. I mean, you got guys like Nolan King over at MMA Junkie, even my boy Dan Tom. You got James Lynch at The Score. You got Aaron Bronstetter at TSN, and obviously you at MMA Fighting. So now I really feel like the MMA media, the best, are looking like the best. So now it's up to the rest to catch up. So I'm really happy for you about that, man. So before I let you go, let them know where they can follow you. Anything else you want to tell the fans, go ahead.
You can follow me on Twitter at MikeHeck_JR, Instagram, which I still don't really use, Mike_HeckJR. And thanks for having me, man. Like I said, I do listen to your show all the time. You and Shaq going back and forth is just hilarious. I always hear Shaq and hear him say treat him accordingly. I just love listening to the show. Welcome back to Half the Battle. It's just stuck in my mind all the time. So I'm excited. Next week you'll probably have a new show breaking down some fights, man. I can't wait to listen to it. So thanks for having me, brother.
Oh, it's absolutely my pleasure, and I truly appreciate the kind words for all the fans. Make sure you follow Mike. You can follow me at Best Fight Picks. Subscribe to Half the Battle on iTunes, SoundCloud, YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, all the places where we are available. I'll be back later this week for another quarantine edition. I got UFC lightweight Drew Dober. We're going to have a very exciting conversation. The guy's in the best point of his career right now. And just someone with an amazing mindset. If you hear him talk, definitely someone you want to keep hearing talk. Very positive guy. Also going to be joined by PFL middleweight champion Lewis Taylor, another super cool dude. Can't wait to talk to him. And it's cool because he won the $1 million at 37 years old. He already had a full career. He could have called it quits, but he got to finally achieve what so many fighters, strive to do their entire careers. He finally got to do it, so I can't wait to talk to him. And then next week, the UFC 249 edition of Half the Battle, we will break down every single fight, start to finish, give a pick. Cannot wait. So thank you guys so much for the time. Thank you, Mike. And until the next time, let's cash these bets.